The folder hit the desk like a door slamming shut. $45,000 gone from the vendor account, and every figure in the report pointed at one man. Owen Maddox stood in the glass office and said nothing. Behind him, the printer went quiet. Around the floor, co-workers found reasons to study their screens. "You have 10 minutes to clear your desk," Lawrence Sterling said. He did not argue. He did not beg. He unclipped his badge and set it on the desk, and the silence that followed was heavier than any denial. "Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Then stay with us, because this is only where the story starts." Weeks earlier, before the folder and the badge and the long walk back to the parking lot, Owen Maddox lived the kind of life no one stops to notice. He worked days as a logistics coordinator at Sterling Freight, routing trucks and reconciling delivery manifests in a low building on the industrial edge of Toledo, Ohio. He drove a sedan with 190,000 miles on it. He packed his own lunch. When the others went out on Fridays, he went home. Home was a 2-bedroom rental with a radiator that knocked all winter and a kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. In the mornings, it was the warmest room in the world. "Dad, you're burning it again," Mia said. 9 years old and certain of everything. Owen lifted the pan off the heat. The eggs had gone brown at the edges. Mia slid onto the stool with the grave patience of a child who has decided her father needs supervision and ate them anyway, every bite, because that was their deal. On the refrigerator hung a drawing she had made of the two of them, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, the word "Dad" spelled out in careful capitals. He had looked at it every morning for 2 years. He still did. He walked her to the bus stop at the corner. She told him about a girl in her class who could whistle through her teeth, and about a book she was halfway through and did not want to put down. He listened to all of it. When the bus came, she hugged him hard around the middle, the way she had since she was small, and he held on a second longer than she did. The money was thin. Sarah's illness had taken what savings they had, and what it left behind. The funeral finished. There was a health plan through work that covered most of Mia's checkups, and rent that climbed a little every spring, and a math that never quite came out even no matter how he ran it. So when the warehouse posted an after-hours inventory count, time and a half, he put his name down first. At Sterling Freight, the people upstairs lived in a different country. Lauren Sterling ran the company her father had built, and these days she ran it the way someone bails a boat, fast and without looking up. There was talk of an outside group called Ashford Capital, of offers and pressure, and a board growing nervous. She moved through the building quickly, and the few times her path crossed Owen's, she did not seem to see him at all. Roland Pierce saw everyone. The chief financial officer had a way of pausing at a desk, glancing at a screen, and moving on with a small private smile, as if he had filed something away. He oversaw the department Owen's work fed into. Owen had learned to keep his answers short. Once, when a vendor reconciliation came back wrong, Owen found the error in under a minute, the way another man might catch a wrong note in a song. The clerk beside him stared. Owen only shrugged, said it was probably a transposed figure, and went back to his manifests. That night, on the shelf above the bedroom closet, behind a box of Sarah's scarves, sat a second box he never opened. Inside were business cards from a firm in Chicago, a name embossed on heavy stock, and a life he had folded up and put away. Mia did not know it was there. No one at Sterling Freight did. To understand the morning that ended it, you have to go back one night, to the Sunday before. The warehouse closed at 6. By 7, the lot had emptied, and the inventory crew had started their slow march down the racks, scanners blinking, clipboards filling. Owen worked the far aisles, counting pallets under the high sodium lights, his breath fogging in the unheated bay. Mia was asleep 2 doors down at Mrs. Alvarez's, the neighbor who kept a folding cot made up for nights like this one. Because the girl was staying over, Mrs. Alvarez would put her on the school bus in the morning. Upstairs, on the finance floor, a light stayed on. Around 10:50, Roland Pierce let himself onto the finance floor, long after the building had gone dark. What he did there, no one would ever see, because whatever the cameras recorded in those minutes did not survive the night. There was only the hum of the servers, and the soft work of a man who knew exactly which records were watched and which were not. At 10:50, Lauren Sterling came out of a board preparation meeting that had run 3 hours and solved nothing, and rode down to the parking structure the whole company shared. Ashford's deadline sat on her desk like a stone. She carried an armful of binders to her car on the upper level, balanced them against the door, and set her handbag on the low concrete ledge beside the space to free her hands. It was her mother's bag, the one thing of her mother's she still used every day. She loaded the binders, slid behind the wheel, and drove up the ramp into the night with her mind already on Monday. The bag stayed on the ledge. At 11:25, Owen clocked out and crossed the upper level of that same structure toward his own car, shoulders aching, eyes raw. That was when he saw it, sitting alone on the ledge under the buzzing light, soft leather the color of dark honey, plainly expensive, plainly forgotten. He looked around. The garage was empty. The lost and found window had closed hours ago, and the only guard on duty was somewhere on his rounds at the far end of the property. He stood there longer than he meant to. He could leave it. It was not his problem. But a bag like that, left overnight in an empty garage, would be gone by morning, and he had a clear idea of who would be asked about it. So he picked it up. He did not open it. Whoever she was, her business was her own. He set it on the passenger seat, drove home, and told himself he would carry it straight to the front desk first thing and let reception sort it out. He overslept by 20 minutes. Even so, he was early. At 7:15 on Monday morning, he came through the lobby with the bag in his hand, heading for the reception counter, and two people from Human Resources stepped into his path before he reached it. A man from security stood behind them. They asked him to come with them. They did not say why. They walked him past his own desk, past the printer, into the glass office where Lauren Sterling was waiting with the folder already open. The folder hit the desk like a door slamming shut. $45,000, gone from the vendor account, and every figure pointed at him. He did not argue. He unclipped his badge. Minutes later he was walking back across the lot to his car, the whole floor watching him go, the found handbag still in his hand, because no one had given him the chance to hand it over. He set it back on the passenger seat. He still did not know whose it was. That night, Owen sat at his kitchen table with the bag in front of him, and finally opened it. He was not looking to pry. He was looking for a name, a card, anything that would let him return it and be done. He found a wallet, and in the wallet a driver's license, and on the license a photograph and a name he had heard for the last time only that morning. Lauren Sterling. He set the license down very carefully, as if it might go off. The woman who had called him a thief in front of the entire floor had, the night before, left $37,000 of handbag on a concrete ledge, and it had ridden home in his car while she filed the report that cost him his job. He sat with it a long time. The math was simple and ugly. A man just branded a thief, returning her property the morning after, would look like exactly what she already believed him to be. A man working an angle, trading the bag for sympathy or his old paycheck back. The easy thing, the safe thing, was to leave it at a police station with no name attached and never speak of it. He turned the wallet over in his hands and felt the old life stir, the one that knew precisely how things looked. "Dad?" Mia stood in the hallway in her socks, hair flat on one side. "You didn't come say goodnight." "I'm coming. Go on back." She didn't move. She had heard the front door that afternoon, heard the careful flatness in his voice all evening, the way children hear weather coming. "Did something bad happen at your work?" He thought about how to answer that. "Some people think I did something I didn't do." Mia considered this with her whole small face. Then she crossed the kitchen and put her arms around him. "I know you didn't do anything bad," she said, into his shirt, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "You never do." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the question of the bag had already answered itself. The next morning he drove to the company he no longer worked for and asked the front desk to call up to Lauren Sterling. They told him to wait. They did not expect her to come down. She came down. She stopped when she saw the bag in his hands. For a moment, something moved across her face that had nothing to do with him. The look of a person who had given up on getting something back and was now watching it return from the dead. "Where did you get that?" she said. It was not quite a question. "You left it on the ledge in the garage Sunday night. I found it on my way out." He held it out. "Everything's still in it. I didn't touch anything but the wallet, and only to find your name." She did not take it. "You expect me to believe that?" "After Monday, I don't expect anything," he said. "It's yours. That's the only reason I'm here." He set it on the counter between them and turned to go. Behind him, she finally picked it up, checked it, and found that he was right, that nothing was missing, and that every word he had said matched the security report already sitting in her inbox about exactly where she had last been seen with it. She stood holding her mother's bag and watched the door close behind a man she had been so certain about, and for the first time the certainty cracked. The crack widened the way cracks do, quietly, on its own time. Lauren told herself it meant nothing. A returned bag was not innocence. A guilty man could be honest about a wallet and still be a thief about a wire transfer. But the report that had cost Owen Maddox his job was sitting open on her screen, and now that she actually read it, line by line, instead of skimming it on a morning when she was already late for 3 other fires, something about it would not lie flat. It was Roland Pierce's report, start to finish. His analysis, his summary, his conclusion. There was no interview with the accused, no statement from Owen, no chance offered for him to explain himself. No second set of eyes on the numbers before the verdict. The recommendation to terminate immediately, before anyone outside the building could so much as whisper the word fraud, had been Pierce's, and she had signed it on a morning when she would have signed almost anything that made one problem disappear before the board could turn it into 10. She called Human Resources herself, which she almost never did. She asked one question. Where had Owen Maddox been clocked in the night the money moved? The answer took a minute to find. He had been on the after-hours inventory count. In the warehouse, 3 buildings and 1 locked stairwell away from the finance floor. His badge had never touched the 3rd floor at all. Not that night, not at any point that anyone could find. She sat with that for a while. Then she did something she could not entirely explain to herself afterward. She picked up the phone and called him. She told him it was a formality, that she needed to verify a few figures before the file was closed for good. He did not point out that he no longer worked there, that she had no standing left to ask him anything. He answered her questions evenly, and when she read him the vendor reconciliation the whole report leaned on, the one number that supposedly proved the theft, he went quiet for a moment. That figure can't be the loss, he said. Excuse me? The 45,000. It's coming out of the escrow as one clean debit. But a vendor escrow doesn't clear in single debits. It nets against incoming receipts on a rolling basis, every cycle. If real money left that account, it left from somewhere this report isn't showing you. Whoever built this either doesn't understand the account or is counting on the person reading it not to. She had a master's degree in finance. She had run this company for 6 years, and a man she had fired off the warehouse floor had just walked her, in under a minute, through a control she had stopped looking at so long ago, she had forgotten it was even there. How do you know that? She said. A pause on the line, longer than the question deserved. I've seen accounts like it before. Before she could press him on what that meant, the office door opened and Pierce leaned in, easy and unhurried, a man stopping by to be helpful. He had heard she was still turning over the Maddox business, he said. He understood the instinct. Truly he did. But the evidence was the evidence. And frankly, with Ashford watching every move they made, the last thing the company could afford was to reopen a closed case over a guilty man's hurt feelings. He smiled and let it land. The board's vote on the Ashford offer, he reminded her gently, was barely 2 weeks out. She thanked him. She said she would let it go after he left. She sat a long while without turning back to her screen, with the unmistakable feeling of someone who has been steered for miles and has only just noticed the hand resting on the wheel. She should have let it go. Instead, 2 days later, she drove across town to see for herself. She told herself it was diligence, that a careful executive confirms what a file claims before she stakes the company on it. The address from his personnel file led her to a tired block of rentals on the east side, chain-link fences and small front porches, and a basketball hoop with no net, and she slowed the car without quite knowing what she expected to find. A man counting stolen money behind a curtain. A man who matched the report she had signed. What she found was Owen Maddox in the patchy grass beside the building, one hand on the back of a bicycle seat, jogging alongside it while a girl in a purple helmet pedaled and shrieked, "You've got it. You've got it. Don't look at me. Look where you're going. Don't let go. I've got you. I've got you." He did not let go until she was steady, and then he did, quietly without telling her, and the girl wobbled and caught herself and sailed 10 whole feet on her own before she remembered to be afraid. When she made it, the look on her father's face was something Lauren had not seen on a grown person in a very long time. Open, undefended, a man with nothing held back. She sat in her car at the curb, the engine ticking as it cooled, and felt the report in her inbox grow thinner and thinner against what was in front of her eyes. Mia spotted the car first, the way children notice anything that does not belong on their street, and before Owen could stop her, she had walked the bike straight over. "Are you lost? You can have lemonade if you want. We made it with too much sugar, but it's still good." Owen reached them a beat later, recognition crossing his face, then a careful, formal stillness, the stillness of a man who has learned exactly what this woman can do to his life with a folder. "Mia, give Miss Sterling some room." "It's all right," Lauren said, and got out of the car, because there was nothing else she could do. They stood in the small yard while Mia explained the lemonade and the bicycle and the loose tooth she was working on with her tongue, narrating her entire 9 years to a stranger who had, 6 days earlier, taken away her father's job. Owen said little. Lauren said less. Between the two adults stood a silence that was not hostile, only careful. The two people who had met as accuser and accused, and now found themselves in the ordinary afternoon sun, with no idea what they were supposed to be to each other. She left before the lemonade. She told Mia it was a beautiful bike, and meant it, and got back in the car, but she did not pull away. She sat at the curb and opened the warehouse camera system on her phone, found the date, and scrubbed to the hours the report described, the hours when Owen Maddox was supposed to have been on the finance floor with his hand in the escrow. The screen returned a flat gray box and 4 words. Footage unavailable, 10:40 to 11:20. The exact window of the theft. Gone. Not corrupted, not buffering, not missing at random across the night. Gone from precisely the 40 minutes that mattered, as cleanly as if someone had reached into the system and lifted them out. She lowered the phone and looked back at the little yard, where a man who could not possibly have been on that floor was steadying a bicycle for his daughter, and felt the ground shift quietly under everything she had been so sure of. The call came 2 days later, from a number she didn't recognize. Theo Briggs had run security at Sterling Freight for 11 years. A broad, quiet man who noticed things and mostly kept them to himself. He asked in a careful voice if they could meet somewhere that wasn't the building. She chose a diner off the highway, vinyl booths and burnt coffee and truckers nursing pie at the counter, and he slid into the seat across from her with a manila envelope that he set on the table and kept one flat hand on, as if it might get up and leave. "I almost didn't make this call," he said. "I want to be honest about that. I've got a security contract that feeds 3 families besides mine. The man who approves it every year is the same man I'm about to talk about. So before I open this, I need you to understand exactly what it's costing me to do it." She told him she understood. She was not sure she did, yet. "The footage from that night didn't fail," Theo said. "It was pulled. I know, because Pierce came to me twice in the last year and asked me, his words, not to retain certain windows. Said it was about protecting the company in case of a lawsuit, that there were privacy issues, that I should trust him. I didn't like the smell of it, so I started quietly keeping my own copies of the things that matter most. The door logs." He opened the envelope and turned a printout around to face her. "The badge access system runs on its own server, separate from the cameras." He never thought about that one. She read it twice to be sure. At 10:51 on Sunday night, Roland Pierce's badge had unlocked the finance floor. There was no entry for Owen Maddox anywhere on the page. Not on that floor, not near it, not all night. The only badge that had opened the door to the room where the money moved, at the hour it moved, belonged to the man who had written the report blaming someone else. "He was there," she said. "He was there," Theo agreed. "I can't tell you what he did once he sat down at his desk, but I can prove he is the one who sat down at it, and that he had me erase the only eyes that could have shown the rest." She found Owen that evening. She had rehearsed nothing on the drive over, and standing on his small porch in the cooling dark, she discovered she could barely get the words out. "The report was wrong. I think part of me has known it for a week. I signed it anyway, in front of the entire floor, and I—" She stopped and made herself finish. "I'm sorry. I know it isn't anywhere near enough, but it's true, and you should hear me say it." Owen was quiet. She braced herself for the anger she knew she had earned, the cold words a lesser man would have been entitled to. It didn't come. He glanced past her, toward the lit front window where Mia's small shadow moved across the curtain, and he asked the only question that had ever really mattered to him. When this gets fixed, he said, will my daughter get her health coverage back? Not his name, not his job, not the apology she owed him, not the weeks of looking over his shoulder in the grocery store. His daughter's checkups. Lauren stood on the porch with no answer ready and felt something turn over in her chest, the slow and dangerous recognition that she had somehow begun to care, very much, what this man thought of her. Yes, she said, I'll make sure of it myself. Then, we should find out what he actually did with the money, Owen said, and stepped back and held the door open for her. They worked at her dining table, because his was too small, spreadsheets between them and the city going dark outside the windows. She had what he lacked, full access to the ledgers, the escrow detail, the wire records. He had what no one at Sterling Freight had ever guessed, a way of reading a set of books that found the lie inside them. He did not announce it. He simply moved through the accounts the way a tracker reads a forest, and within an hour he had the shape of it. The $45,000 had not been stolen so much as routed. It had left the vendor escrow in pieces small enough to ride below review, landed briefly in an operating account, and gone out again to a limited liability company with a Delaware address and no employees, no website, no purpose anyone could name. Owen pulled the registration. The shell's sole manager traced, through one more layer, to a name that made Lauren go still. The contact was an entity controlled by Ashford Capital. He's not just skimming, Owen said quietly. He's bleeding the company on their behalf, soften the numbers, manufacture a scandal, scare the board, and the offer they're pushing starts to look like a rescue instead of a robbery. The $45,000 is almost beside the point. You were the target. He needed someone to take the fall while he set the fire. Pierce understood he was being followed before they did. The first blow came by phone, a voice Owen hadn't heard in 3 years. A former colleague from Chicago calling to say someone had been asking pointed questions about why Owen Maddox had really left the firm and did he know anyone might want to make that public. The threat was clear. Stop, or your name burns twice. The second blow was quieter and almost worked. 2 mornings later, a deposit appeared in Owen's personal checking account, $9,000, from an unfamiliar source, sitting there like bait, ready to become the new proof, fresh evidence that the thief had finally been caught moving his loot. A different man would have panicked, or spent it, or sent it back in a fury and muddied the trail. Owen did none of that. He photographed the screen. He noted the timestamp, days after the original theft, and he followed the deposit's origin until it dead-ended in the same controlled account Pierce had used before. Then he left it exactly where it sat, untouched, and called Lauren. He just handed us the last piece, Owen said. Don't move it. Don't report it yet. A planted transaction is only a problem if you spend it. Left alone, with the timestamp and the source, it's a confession. That night, the work done, they sat with the quiet between them. She asked finally, what had really happened in Chicago. He told her about Sarah, about the diagnosis, and the year that followed, and the morning he had walked into a corner office and resigned without a plan because there was a 4-year-old at home who had just lost her mother and could not also lose her father to a job that ate him alive. Lauren told him about her own father, about inheriting a company and a fear of failing the only man who had ever believed she could run it, and about how that fear had made her sign a report she hadn't read. Neither of them said the other thing. It sat in the room with them, unhurried, and they let it. Lauren did not call a quiet meeting. She called the full board. She had spent the week preparing for it the way Owen had taught her, building not an accusation but a chain, each link able to carry the full weight on its own if the others were doubted. She had outside legal counsel seated in the room, and at the far end of the long table an independent forensic auditor, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, and 40 years of unwinding other people's frauds behind her. And she had asked Roland Pierce to attend. He came smiling, unhurried, certain he had already won, because as far as he knew the only new development was a deposit that buried the man he had chosen to blame. He opened by getting ahead of it, the way he always did. He was glad the whole board was assembled, he said, because troubling new evidence had come to light over the weekend. A deposit, $9,000, had landed in Owen Maddox's personal account only days earlier, from a source no one had yet been able to name. The thief, it seemed, had finally grown careless. He recommended the company hand the entire matter to the police at once and put the long embarrassment behind it for good. "I agree we should bring in the police," Lauren said, and let the relief flicker across his face before she finished. "So let's be certain they have everything." She laid it down one piece at a time and did not raise her voice once. The access logs first, pulled from the badge server Pierce had forgotten even existed, showing that at 10:51 on the night in question, a single badge had opened the finance floor, and it had not belonged to Owen Maddox. It had belonged to Roland Pierce. Then the cameras, or rather the clean rectangular hole where 40 minutes of footage should have been, and beside it, the recovered system metadata, showing that the deletion had been ordered under Pierce's own login credentials. Then the money itself, the path out of the vendor escrow in pieces small enough to ride below review, into an operating account, and out again to a shell company in Delaware, with no employees and no purpose. A shell that traced, one layer further on, to an entity controlled by Ashford Capital. And then, last, the $9,000 Pierce had walked in waving as proof. Its timestamp, days after the supposed theft. Its origin, the very same account Pierce himself controlled. The evidence he had planted to finish Owen was the evidence that finished him. The room had gone completely silent. Across the table, the Ashford representative was already quietly gathering her folders, putting visible distance between her firm and a fraud that now wore its name. Pierce started to speak, stopped, started again, and found there was nothing left under his feet to stand on. By the end of the hour he had been suspended, his credentials revoked, the file handed to counsel for referral to the authorities, every step taken cleanly and on the record. In the quiet that followed, the auditor took off her reading glasses and studied the man who had sat at the back of the room the entire time, saying almost nothing, only sliding a single page across to Lauren whenever she reached for one. "I know your work," she said slowly. "That escrow trace, the way it's built, layer by layer. I sat across a table from you in a restructuring deal years ago in Chicago. You're Owen Maddox, Halverson. You ran their forensic group." Heads turned. Lauren turned with them and looked at the man she had fired for theft in front of his coworkers, and finally saw the whole of who had been standing in her warehouse all along. It did not all resolve in a single day. These things move on paper, and paper moves slowly, but it moved. A correction went out to the entire company over Lauren's own signature, naming the error plainly and clearing Owen Maddox without the soft, lawyerly hedging that usually exists to protect the people who got it wrong. She did not hide behind passive voice. She wrote that the company had accused an innocent man, that the company had been wrong, that she had been wrong, and she sent it to every address on the staff list. She made sure his health coverage was reinstated and backdated to the day of his firing, so that not a single one of Mia's appointments fell through the gap. That was the first promise she kept. She made sure of something else too, quietly, before anyone else could think to act on it. Theo Briggs's security contract was renewed for 3 full years, signed and locked, so that no one could ever punish him for the manila envelope he had carried into a diner off the highway. Courage, she had decided somewhere in the last 2 weeks, should never cost a man his livelihood. Ashford Capital withdrew its offer within the week. Whatever else they had wanted, they did not want their name anywhere near a fraud referral, and the board that had been ready to sell out of fear found its nerve again the moment the wolf was gone from the door. Then she asked Owen to come in. She did not do it to ease her own conscience. She did it because the company had just lost its chief financial officer to a jail cell and badly needed another, and because she had watched a man from the warehouse floor take apart, in one evening at her dining table, a fraud her entire finance department had missed for months. "I want you to take the job," she said. "Chief Financial Officer. Not as an apology. I want to be clear about that. The apology I owe you stands on its own, separately, and I'll keep making it. I'm offering you this because you are the best I have ever seen at it, and I would be a fool to watch that walk out my door a second time." He was quiet for a while. Through the glass wall of her office he could see the lobby, and in the lobby, in a waiting room chair far too big for her, Mia sat swinging her feet and reading a library book, waiting for him to be finished. "I left that life on purpose," he said at last. "I'm not going back to a job that eats a man's evenings and calls it ambition. I did that once, before. I'm not doing it to her." Lauren followed his eyes to the girl in the chair, and she nodded, because she understood, and because she found she did not want to talk him out of it. "Then tell me what you can do," he said, "and I'll tell you whether there's a version of this that still lets me be standing at the bus stop at 3 o'clock. They worked it out right there, standing at the window, not as an employer and an applicant, but as something harder to name, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched and somehow did not. Outside, in the lobby, Mia turned a page. The distance between the two of them had not vanished, but it was a different kind of distance now, and they both felt it. More than a month later, the new arrangement had settled into a shape that worked. Owen consulted for Sterling Freight on his own terms now, 3 days a week and never a minute past 5 o'clock, slowly rebuilding the financial controls that should have caught Roland Pierce years before he ever found his opening. The company had steadied. Ashford was a closed chapter no one missed. Pierce's case was making its way through a courtroom on its own unhurried schedule, and the same people who had found reasons to study their screens that morning in the glass office now met Owen's eye in the hallway and held it. Lauren came for dinner on a Thursday, which had somehow, without anyone ever proposing it out loud, become a standing thing. Mia had appointed herself in charge of the entire evening, and partway through she produced, with enormous ceremony, a brand new drawing for the refrigerator. 3 figures this time, under the same lopsided yellow sun she always drew. 2 of them tall, 1 of them small, and all 3 holding hands in a row. "That one's you," Mia informed Lauren, in case it was somehow not obvious. "I made your hair the right color and everything. See?" Lauren looked at the drawing for a long moment, and found she did not entirely trust her own voice. After Mia had been put to bed, the 2 of them stood together in the cramped kitchen with the radiator ticking, and Lauren set something on the table between them. The handbag, her mother's bag, soft leather the color of dark honey, the one thing of her mother's she had thought, for one terrible night, she had lost forever. "I want you to keep it," she said. "Lauren, I can't take that." "You can. You're the only person I have ever met who held something worth $37,000, with every reason in the world to keep it and no one who would ever have known, and gave it back anyway because it wasn't his." She pushed it an inch across the table toward him. "If I ever start to forget what actually matters, I want it sitting wherever you are. So hold on to it for me, please." He looked down at the bag, and then up at her, and understood, the way he understood numbers, that they were not really talking about a bag at all. He didn't make a speech. That had never been his way, and she would not have believed a word of one anyway. He simply reached across the worn leather, and closed his hand over hers, and let it stay there, warm and certain, and neither of them moved to fill the silence, because for once, the silence was already saying everything that needed to be said. He had once returned a bag that was never his, and asked for nothing in return. He had never once imagined that the thing he would find, in the end, was a home.